All right, how is everyone doing today? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are receiving this. We like to thank you and welcome you for being here. Um, I am Trey Tucker. As you guys know, we've been doing a bunch of webinars for this series for our parent engagement piece, and we have another wonderful installation to our webinars. I think this is very important, and it's especially with the climate of everything going on right now. We have Mr. Marcus Stallworth with us from Welcome to Reality, and he's here to give us a presentation with and how to handle and how to have safe interactions with law and providing his legal expert and things of that nature. So without further ado, thank you, Mr. Marcus Stallworth, for being here, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much for that, Trey. Thanks for the opportunity, and we're really excited and happy to be here. So, first and foremost, on behalf of Welcome to Reality, we'd like to thank Queen Anne and Zynga Center for extending this opportunity for us to spend some time with us not only in a virtual space and maximize the technology in a meaningful way, but just given the fact that there's an ongoing resource where individuals can gather and gain information. We know that with time and travel and childcare and employment, sometimes learning opportunities get lost or missed opportunities take place. So we just wanted to take a moment to applaud the creativity that's here and the commitment to empower individuals with resources and information. So, as stated, my name is Marcus Stallworth. I'm one of the co-owners of Welcome to Reality. I have the privilege to share this space with my colleagues, Anthony Gay and Karan Webb. We have a variety of services and resources that we offer and provide, not only on a local level, not only on a national level, but an international level as well. So I just want to just take a quick moment just to highlight some of the marquee features and areas that we provide, not in a self-serving way, but as individuals who might be seeking and looking for ongoing information outside of this space. Please know that we're an area that you can reach out to, and whatever we could do to support and accommodate your needs, we're more than willing to do so. So we provide a variety of resources in a myriad of ways, similar to these situations where it could be lectures or workshops. We also create opportunities to work with agencies in a consultation space to really kind of assess and support their forward-facing efforts to be strength-based, progressive, inclusive, and responsive to some of the topical areas that might be relevant and prevalent to the world that's happening today. And we also have some resources that are specific to our adults, specific to clinicians, and some that are specifically geared towards youth, adolescents, and teenagers. So you'll see here our media, mentoring through media curriculum, really just talking with kids around how to use technology in a meaningful way and how to use critical thinking and be responsive in that way. And then we also have an early exposure to education program where we actually bring students, school age students, to high school campuses so they get an opportunity to get that experience of what that could look like, and then talk about what are some of the contributing factors that can increase their ability to be in that environment if that's something they choose to explore in the future. Here are just a couple of quick snapshots of some of the areas that we focus and concentrate on in terms of training. We have a whole training institute where we have a chance to work, like I said, clinicians, parents, staff, educators, agencies, etc. So as I'm talking, again, you'll just see some of the things that might be across your screen at this particular time. If you're seeing vaping, if you live in Connecticut or the neighboring states, you know that this is something that's been amplified in many ways. And also, I'd be remiss if we didn't highlight the importance of the building blocks of effective co-parenting. That can mean in intact families, that could be divorced or separated families, and foster and adoptive families as well. So as you just take a look at some of these areas, again, this is not self-serving. We just want to offer and share a variety of the resources that we provide. So yes, some of them are academic in nature. Others that you'll see might be on the cultural side, and some are connected to social media usage and child welfare. Uh, Many might be familiar that hip hop had their 50th anniversary not too long ago, and our Hip Hop Saved Us is a very sought after resource that we provide. And for my therapists, clinicians, even family members. We know how music can help us, motivate us, support us when we're in the low space, and also create a place of healing when necessary. So we just find creative ways to be engaging with the population that we're committed to work with and support. And by now, you probably have a glance at these other pieces and components that's here. A lot of times, the elderly population gets overlooked, right? And the concentration is on the youth and how to support them and what's going on in that world. But you see here, we talk about the elderly population, we talk about the workforce environment, and of course, talking about the importance of fatherhood engagement and social connections and their interconnectivity, how they relate to each other. And similar to what we'll be talking about today, we have us isolated training that focuses on justice, racial justice to be specific. Again, as we look at different customs, values, and traditions, we have a particular learning opportunity that focuses on demystifying Islam. And then we also talk about the impact of social media on children and families, which perhaps we'll have an opportunity to talk about as well. And then lastly, as we kind of fold this piece out, we have some of our newer introductions to this work. We have our four-part series of the Dear Black Male. And what this series really talks about is like the historical perspective of Black males, uh, stereotypes, misconceptions, uh, systems that also include law enforcement and incarceration, the mental health component, and the reluctancy to engage in services. And then from our national and global work, we also understood that there was a need to speak to the companion of this, which is the misconception of the angry Black woman. And we really trying to spend time to peel back some of the societal conceptions and stereotypes, and a lot of times unknowingness about what certain cultures look like and how we present ourselves, how we represent, and where roles that we play. And then again, as we kind of dovetail into our last piece, just talking about the gang culture, again, something that's very, 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 very popular in the world that we're in now. So I just asked you to take a glance at what you see on your screen here. These are some of the ongoing partners and relationships that we have locally, nationally, and internationally. So you'll see at the university level, at the child welfare level, at the advocacy level, at the for-profit, nonprofit level, and some of our international colleagues are represented as well. And as I stated in the beginning, we're really happy to be in this space to have a chance to continue to lift up the great work that Queen Anne and Zinga is doing and be able to expand some of the content knowledge for some of the areas that they're committed to support. So this particular webinar, if you will, is a very, very, very unique topic, and it's close to home to me for many reasons. Not only being a man of color, but also having a son who also is a young Black man, and the title speaks for itself. Protecting our Black youth and preparing them for police encounters. So here's the piece that's a good thing, and here's the part that's another piece. So the good thing is we have spaces and places that we can kind of talk about these issues, talk about these challenges, if you will. And you'll see in a minute how we're going to anchor some things, how we could talk about what are some ways we can educate ourselves, empower our children, and then also strengthen our communities. But if you look at that title within itself, look at what it says. It says protecting Black youth, right? Dot, dot, dot. But then it says preparing our children for police encounters. So that word preparing is really, really profound. So, first of all, in this context, it's an action word. But second of all, it doesn't necessarily say if, it really kind of lends itself to how to be prepared for when. And what does that look like, right? So you probably hear me say this more than once. Our commitment is really to help people be in a situation where they can be more proactive than reactive. Once we're in a reactive space, different emotions kick in and activate, and our approach and outcomes could be very, very different. So here's what we're really, really hoping to challenge in ourselves as a company, and then encouraging others to consider in terms of participants. So we want to acknowledge some of the fears that are here. There are real thoughts. This is not just you know, a movie. This is not just a one-time singular event that continues to be, repetitiously shared and showed on and on and on. There's a real sense of tenseness, anxiety, stress for some parents. If you have children, parents of color, right? We're talking about men specifically, but I'd also say this: our young women also could fit this category and meet this criteria as well. But we don't want to scare people. What we really want to do is empower them, provide some strategies in some areas that might be helpful for them for support, and then kind of help them focus on how we could build up our children, how we could strengthen their knowledge, their confidence, their self-esteem, but also provide them with the knowledge and skills if and when certain encounters happen. So let me just take a brief moment just to pause right here and say this. I guess this is our way by way of, dare I say, disclaimer. So, although we're going to have some conversation that might have some density to it, and this particular area is talking about law enforcement, we are not saying that every single law enforcement individual is a bad person. I have family that's in law enforcement, family in leadership positions in law enforcement. Some of my colleagues also have other individuals in their family and friends and associates. This is not a one size fit all type of thing. What we do know is there is a statistical disproportionality around interactions with law enforcement, encounters with law enforcement, arrests with law enforcement, and in some spaces, those numbers kind of speak for themselves, right? So I just want to put that out there that there's not all. As a matter of fact, there are some individuals who have understanding of what those challenges could look like, who have made conscious decisions to step in to those spaces to kind of tilt the narrative a little bit and be an agent of change. So we'd be remiss if we didn't just highlight those pieces. And like this is why some of this stuff happens and why it matters. We wouldn't be having this conversation together right now if this wasn't something that is a real issue in many communities, particularly communities of color. Now, let me just share this with you. So, welcome to reality. We're really big on having kind of discussion-based conversations, create environments that promote critical thinking and thinking, and then also just create a space where we really contemplate what actions could be after our time together. So in other words, after this time, what are some things that you learned that could be helpful? Where was there an increase in what you knew, and what are some specific things that you could do that can help insulate your family and those that are important to you? So a lot of times the visuals just kind of serve as a backdrop. You just kind of want to share that, but they always reinforce what it is that we're talking about. So when we're talking about some of these tragic realities, we could think about Tamir Rice. We could think about others. Sadly, we could think of a list and a list and a list and a list of other young individuals who found their lives cut short at the hands of law enforcement, where perhaps a simple approach, gesture, lack of gesture, words, language, ask, question could have shifted outcomes for many of them. We're not there for every outcome or situation with or with body cameras, but again, we want to make sure that we highlight those things. I would say this respectfully: if there's one child who finds themselves losing their life at the hands of law enforcement, where things could have been different, that's simply one child too many. One child too many. So let's look at some of the numbers just briefly. So when we talk about some of those disparities, so some individuals who sit in communities of color or have lived experience as uh, a black or brown individual in the world, sometimes people say, well, we're kind of preaching to the choir because we know about this a little bit. Others who might not have the same level of encountership, they be like, yeah, come on. Is it really, how really frequent is this? Is the gap that big? Is it really, or are people just kind of over stressing some of these one or two things that we've seen in the media or social media? So let's just look at these numbers. So let's go lowest to highest. So in terms of statistical evidence as it relates to unequal treatment in policing, look at what we were able to capture. 30% of white individuals, those who identify as white or Caucasian, have experienced unequal treatment with regard to police. 50% of the Hispanic population from this particular resource and research we were able to ascertain. And then 60% of Black individuals, Black males specifically. So, just in a comparative way, we're talking double as it relates to our Caucasian counterparts. Double. And for those who have need or curiosity about the numbers and the research we were able to garner and grab, please let us know. We're more than willing to share some of those numbers with you. So again, not saying all, but I don't care who is under there. If white was where black was or Hispanic was where white was, we say, geez, why is there such a vast variation? What are the differences and what does that really look like? Now, here's the part where you see where we talk about the talk. So here's an interesting situation. When some individuals talk with other parents and they ask, have you had the talk yet with your children? For some people, they are referring to the talk as making good choices with individuals you're interested in. They're talking about prophylactics and protection. They're talking about sex, who you share your body with, how do you make sure that you're safe. Those kind of discussions that may happen with, teenagers, adolescents, young adults, et cetera, et cetera. Let me just add a quick little asterisk here, really quick, if I could. Here's what's happening in the emerging, growing, and developing society. And I'm speaking to all my parents who are hearing this. When we talk about the talk, even if you're talking about choices with sexuality, please understand this. The days of when individuals might decide to be intimate, those numbers have dropped significantly. And when we say drop, we're not talking about the reduction of sexual interactions, but we're talking about the number of when uh, young people decide to step into those very adult-like spaces. So in some parts of the country, many parts of the country, young individuals are losing their virginity at age 11, 11 to 13. That could be sixth grade, fifth grade, depending on when your birthday is. So again, different discussion for different areas. But what we're understanding is many adults are having the talk around making good choices with partners way past the time that they've already had experiences, encounters. Correct? So similarly, when we're talking about the talk, when we're talking with other communities, the talk can mean how do you protect yourself when you have encounters with law enforcement? Here's some things you need to know to make sure that you get home. I've done a lot of things and been a lot of places in my life, and I have to tell you, I was probably one of the important, saddest, hardest, yet necessary conversations that I had to have with my son when he got his license and he was going to be heading off to college and having a car that had a little bit of light tint on it and being an individual whose hair is a little long, little dreads, those kind of situations that might conjure up different thoughts and assumptions, which we'll talk about in a moment. So colleagues, just think about what happens when we don't have those talks. At the end of the day, I know everybody wants our kids to be safe. So let's just expand some of these pieces and say, well, why in the world do some of these things happen? And like, what does that look like in real time? So again, sometimes the numbers aren't, necessarily the definitive piece, but the numbers can give us some insight to make us have cause for pause. So when we think about young people getting detained, 5 times more young men of color have that experience more than their white colleagues or their white peers or their white counterparts. That's enormous. So we ask, why does that happen? And again, we don't know everything because we're not there, but there are many influences that may play contributing roles. Some of it could be media representation. You see a young man who presents a certain way, his hair is a certain way, his clothes are a certain way. If they happen to get stopped and their music is a certain way, there could be certain activating facts that perpetuated in media in such a repetitious way that, even with or without training, the brain starts to activate differently. And then sometimes it could just be the way individuals look. So we also understand that many children of color, Black children specifically, often may present a little older than their chronological age. So, what does that look like? Right now, we're talking about preparing our children. That also could be young women. Think about that. Some of our young women might present from a visual standpoint, a little bit more mature in terms of development and maybe even in their maturity, actual maturity, cognitive maturity, based on their family environment, where they sit in birth order, what the household dynamics are. All those things could play a role. And look at that wonderful word there as we introduce a little academia, adultification bias. Right. So sometimes we react to a child based or an individual based on what we see. So if I was a burly Black individual and I had on a hoodie and I had on Tim's and I had on dreads that were swaying back and forth and I was, standing in a certain kind of way, perhaps I might garner a different level of attention. Whereas somebody else who might look different in stature and different in presentation might stroll by under the radar, if you will, or with the least potential for quote unquote risk. And a lot of times, what we're learning now with information science and data is it's the other individuals who are strolling by, who are going under the radar, who are kind of, moving through. And then, we think about that level of force and that physical force, three times the other individuals that we're also referencing will see use of force. So why is that? How come? What are those factors? We can't speak for every and all, but these are some realities for Black children. So once again, by way of respectful repetition, given the understanding of these areas, what are we doing to protect and insulate our children just to make sure that they are aware, they know about safety, and also have some knowledge about their rights as well? So, as we speak about rights, just take a glance at some of these things that you see here on the screen. So, yep. So, in the movies, we see this all the time. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. Sure. But you also have the right to silence. You have the right to silence. So you can refuse to answer any questions, you know, anything besides, your name and who you are, those kind of pieces. A lot of kids don't know that. They're nervous, they're scared, they don't know what to do. Ready? Here's something that can exacerbate situations too. If your friends around, do some people feel the need to like show out and don't feel like they a punk or that they're not soft? All those things could be contributing factors. Here's another piece that we'll talk about perhaps in a few moments when we talk about how your environment might contribute to how people may respond. But look at some of these things that are here. The right to call. They have a right to ask if they can call their parent their legal guardian. How many kids know that? How many kids know that? And when they're talking about, can we search, can we do this? You can decline in many cases to say, no, I don't give you authorization to search my vehicle, officer. Right? And there's different types of steps that need to take place in many occasions for those things to take place. So look at this last one. This one I say because technology is a wonderful thing. Technology is what's connecting us right now, but there are also some pros and cons to technology. Or maybe I should say some advantages and disadvantages. So, yes, With technology, some individuals have had the opportunity to capture unprompted and egregious acts as they were developing and happening. Yes, some of those have been very helpful for investigations. They've been helpful for raising awareness, and in some national spaces on bigger stages, help really create motion and movements and activism and all those things alike. However, when there are individuals being recorded, sometimes when people know that they're being recorded, sometimes it can elicit a little bit of a act out behavior. We're gonna talk about it. Let's just talk about it, right? So think about what that looks like. Oh no, this is on camera. This might go viral. I ain't gonna let them punk me. I ain't gonna let them do whatever. And those things could play a role. We also have seen individuals who are recording, egging individuals on. And as they're egging them on, now they're getting amped up. Now it's kind of limiting their level of options, at least in their mind. It's still a threatening scenario that could have detrimental outcomes. But in those moments, think about how those things could play a role. And here's a piece that we often don't speak about as much. Sometimes, depending on who's recording and in what way, sometimes they also can become a fixation of law enforcement as well. Like, hey, put that camera down, take that phone away, you know. And then, like I said, their focus could be on them, and then that could germinate and create something different in terms of reaction, responses, and different types of actions in a legal way. So again, just think about what the rights are, learning what the rights are in general for people, but then how do we have those conversations and empower our young people? So this piece here, words are one thing, numbers are something else, but how do we find ways to transfer actions into words? So one of my near and dear friends and colleagues, has this kind of mantra that talks about words over actions. Words over actions. So we can tell the kids be safe. We can tell the kids to look in different ways and be make good choices. That's fine and necessary. But how many of us have taken the next step to create kind of real world scenarios to see what that could look like, to see what their reaction might be, what their response might be, and how we might be able to applaud them for what they are doing and maybe pepper in some insight of some areas for consideration. So let's give some examples. So we talk about the walking scenario. Many of our children get approached, especially in the city, kids are walking home. We don't hear much about this now, but like in places like New York, they used to have the stop and frisk. They could just randomly stop you based on a preconceived assumption that perhaps there might be something else going on. So if somebody walks up to your kids and they're a law enforcement, what do they do? What can they do? Some of our young kids, they're afraid. First thing they might do is run. Now, if you run, what does that signal? And then what might that turn into? So what could that look like? What could that look like? And then we talk about public space practice, and once again, just thinking about if they're in the school, they're in the mall, this is amazing. Some of the work we do around social media and technology, fights are happening in school at an alarming rate. And they're not in every school and not in all schools, but in some densely populated areas where they start to see the most popular physical altercations, guess when they are? In school, Monday morning, many times before they even get before lunchtime. Because through social media, individuals chirping back and forth, this, that, and the third, people egging them on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then these altercations take place. But many schools have school resource officers. So what does that look like? If something's happening in the mall, what kind of conversations are we having with our kids to say, you don't need to be there to be watching. You don't need to be there to be recording. What are some steps that you can do to get yourself out of immediate danger, but then also not to get kind of corralled in, for lack of a better word, with the larger group with the assumption that you're part of whatever it is that's happening and taking place, right? Difficult conversations, but we need to have some of those discussions. And then, I'm gonna slow my cadence down a little bit for this next one Because here's the one that we often hear about the most: traffic stops. Traffic stops. What are we doing to prepare our kids? Your son play basketball. You bring him to the gym, warm day, you let him go outside and shoot. Your daughter run track, you let her run around. Why we let our kids practice and be prepared for so many things around sports? What kind of practice? This is a respectful rhetorical question. What kind of practice or rehearsal are we introducing them to for scenarios that could be potentially uh, helpful if done properly or life threatening? So, what does rehearsing look like? Think about what rehearsing look like. And let's just take it a step further. When they ask you license and registration, we'll talk about something else in a moment. Do your kids, if they're driving your car, do they know what a license and do they know what a registration is? Do they know what a proof of insurance is? If it's in their own car, do they have to dig through wrappers? Do they have to dig through other things? Right? Think about that. We talk about being able to have access to what you need easily that can reduce or mitigate any kind of raised antennas for something that might be in a suspicious way. And let me be very clear, this is not about fear. This is being knowledgeable about what rights that we do have and what are some of the movements that we can do to reduce or prevent the possibility of a seemingly simple scenario, going sideways. And I guess it wouldn't be fair if I didn't say this piece as well. Law enforcement individuals put their life on the line every single day. So let's be very clear. There are some people who have different intentions. And they say, "You have anything on you?" They say no. And guess what? They find out they have something on them. They say, "Have you been drinking?" They say, "No, sir." And they find their blood alcohol's through the roof. So there is a level of safety that needs to take place. So this is not, conceding, but just understanding words and terms and language that by their training, they are taught to look for, that sometimes we might conjure up without even realizing it. So with all these things we talk about, man, this could be stressful. It could be overwhelming. You'd be like, what in the world is all these things going on? And especially for young individuals, people of color, young men of color, we have this whole level of hyper masculinity that exists, that you have to be big and strong and tough and bigger and faster than every single body else on the planet. And sometimes that bravado could conjure up different things. What are we doing to show our children that they are loved more than just the report card, more than just the touchdown, loved and supported for their individuality, right? Think about some of the things that they're bumped up against daily around what society says they should look like. What does media tell them they should look like? How are they measuring themselves up against their friends and their peers? And teach them how to know that everybody has individual greatness, individual strengths, and have that ability to see that. What we have find is individuals who might have limited support systems, lowered self-esteem, reduced self-confidence, could find themselves leaning into different crowds, making different choices, finding themselves in different scenarios that could really have the ability to be negatively impactful for their lives. And what we really want to talk about is just the brilliance of the history and the resilience. Again, Black history, is it important? Yes. Do many schools talk about it in February? Yes. But there are millions of wonderful stories that could supersede 28 days in a month, that show resilience, creativity, individuality, thoughtfulness, never giving up, trying different approaches, creating legacy, building, inventing, developing, all these kind of things. Some of those things just help build your positive sense of self. There's a great book, albeit from the 70s, called The Bluest Eye from Toni Morrison. And in that particular book, there was a young girl of color who happened to share an environment with a Caucasian girl with these beautiful blue eyes, specifically according to her. And she was saying, those eyes are so beautiful. I I would really love to have those kind of eyes. And every night she would go to bed and she would pray and hope that when she woke up, she'd have blue eyes, and to no avail. And then she would get discouraged or keep going to say, to have something that beautiful, it must take time. So it isn't about the eyes or the eyeballs, but she was seeing herself, measuring herself against others and what that looked like for them. So really just talking about um, our history, connecting our people to positive individuals within the community, and just promote positive Black development and identity. Now, even though I'm saying this and sharing this, this is not singling out or saying that other races, genders, or cultural environments do not have their own presence and their own beautiful history, because they do. They do. It's just interesting with certain areas. I mean, we're presenting this material on a particular day in May, and depending if you subscribe to the Mexican culture, this is a wonderful day for celebration, right? So other cultures have days that they recognize themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. We happen to be talking today about, the wonderful history, but also the need for being mindful so you can raise your awareness, acknowledge what some things might look like in your environment. And parents, what are some action steps that we could take to empower our children? And then respectfully, how can we hold ourselves accountable to make sure that they're armed with information? So again, welcome to reality. We really don't sit in the space to just read to other people. That's not what we would do. That's not what this is. But we wanted to just put some words or some phrases that might prompt your thinking about what diligence could look like. All right. So think about the benefit of having access to a legal representative, not just when you're in crisis and something happened and now you're scrambling for a bondsman. Doesn't mean you need to have someone on retainer, but if something was to happen, is there someone that you could reach out to? Or is there a place in your community that you could educate yourself on that might have, affordable supports in that way? Right. And then as you're looking at these other pieces, they're kind of self-explanatory, but I want to go just highlight the one on the bottom in the essence of time, just really talking about emotional support. Encourage journaling, therapy, healthy ways of expression. Outside of the work we do here, Welcome to Reality, um, we also are rolling out a different arm, if you will, a different tentacle called reality-based healing. And for myself, who has a private practice, it's very interesting that a lot of times men in general are hesitant to reach out to ask for help, specifically in a clinical space. And there's some societal norms that say that that could be a sign of weakness. So what can happen? You could hold things in, you could self-medicate, you could react and have outbursts on others, right? All those things could be precipitating factors that can have negative outcomes. So think about that. And at some point in the very, very near future, we'll hope that we might have an opportunity to share a little bit more about some of the healing approaches that reality-based healing is intending to roll out as early as this summer. But again, sometimes that could just be talk therapy, or find a safe place that you could communicate, a trusted person. So as we kind of spin down some of this time, and then, if there's any questions or comments or need for clarity, we're more than willing to do that. We just want to talk about the youth rights card. So some people are familiar with this, some have never heard of this at all. But think about what this is. This is a printable card that your kids can put in their wallet. They can trim it down, put it in their case of where their cell phone is, however, somewhere that they have on their person. And just look at the things that are here that can remind them that they have a right to remain silent, how they can ask, can they would like to call their parent. And if they don't consent to a search, when something's happening, your brain might not be organizing itself in that way. Once again, this is not a cheat code. This is by just shared experience and having the privilege to work with law enforcement in the past in different capacities. Law enforcement, when they think something's happening, there's a skill set that they learn about how they raise their voice and how they give you directives. That can catch you off guard if you're not aware, especially a young person, especially a teenager, especially somebody who might be in a different part of town, and especially if you have some of your friends with you, male or female, right? So, how can we prepare our young ones, not if, but when how they could do that. In the sports world, they say, if you don't if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Why do we have all these applicable terms when it comes to performance in arts and athletics, and not so much in terms of preparation for these other areas that could be part of the experience for statistically at a higher level for individuals of color? So here are a couple of phrases that we wanted to introduce you to, and then also some body language considerations as well. So look at what we put there. Am I free to go? I'd like to call my parent. I'm reaching for my ID now. Now think about what those things might say. Those are questions or statements that you're either looking for clarity, or you're informing them what you would like to do or what you're intending to do, right? So when those things happen, that is an opportunity to use language that translates to law enforcement that could lessen the possibility of them misinterpreting your actions, your movements, or your lack thereof. And then look at these here. We talk about keeping your hands visible, keeping yourself in a calm stance. Remember how we were talking earlier about some of those scenarios? Let's try them. Try them. If you drive like this, that's your choice. That's your choice. That Nobody's going to stop you for that in isolation. However, if you get pulled over, one of the things they'll say if they can't see is show me your hands. Okay? So if you put your hands on the wheel in a way that are clearly visible, that is using knowledge and self-awareness. That's not necessarily a sign of weakness. And talk to them. You're entitled to ask questions. And again, slow movements. Officer, I'm letting you know. I'm getting ready to reach for my uh, insurance like you asked. And here are some questions that are here too, or statements. So this is why I'm really, really happy that this is being recorded, because sometimes when we have conversations, content can zip by kind of quickly. So at least we wanted to put things together in a way that could be seen, that could be captured, that could be screenshots, that could have been rewinded, et cetera, et cetera. But these are things that could be very helpful. And let us just please share this. This is not just for our young boys and girls. This also could be applicable and transferable to our men and women. So just something to think about, colleagues. And then lastly, we just wanted to kind of leave you on the whole transfer of learning piece, some opportunities for ongoing learning. First thing, just know some of your rights. So think about how many things we Google or ask our verbal click button, hey, so and so, tell me the weather for tomorrow. Do some diligence to use those same resources to see what are some of your rights are. And guess what? There are some policy-based solutions that are out there for police reform. Like I said, we're not saying every cop, we're not saying all police precincts. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is that statistically, for many reasons, our Black and brown individuals are getting stopped more frequently, detained more frequently, and experiencing physical force more frequently. So, what can we do as parents, providers, community members, leaders to arm, educate? Let me scroll that back. Arm, meaning with information, not arm in a different way, but provide them with the information and the language skills and tools that they can be prepared before when they walk out that door. And then we talk about some books that you could look at. We had mentioned The Talk itself, but there's actually a book called The Talk. And just like any other algorithm, the more you scroll down, you'll see other related type of content or readings or learning opportunities, and just really just looking at your community, man, and finding ways that you could get support if necessary and needed. So as we wrap up, in the essence of time, we just once again want to thank you all for making the decision to either participate direct or to click on and view this webinar. Once again, on behalf of Welcome to Reality, we're really, really grateful for Queen Anne and Nzinga Center for offering us an opportunity to make a contribution. If you have any questions, any needs for clarity, needs for support, you're looking for additional resources, we're right here in Connecticut. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll see our website that's here, um, our email addresses, and then contact information as well. So once again, thank you for making the time to make your children a priority and individuals in your community as well. So at this point, I'd love to turn it back over to Trey and Diane, and we'll figure out how we'll spend our remaining moments together.
So, first, I just want to say thank you. That presentation was wonderful and very helpful, especially when it comes to knowing your rights and understanding what you are able to do, and even breaking down movements and how fast movements can kind of be seen as threatening. I thought that was very important. I took a couple notes, and I had a question for you as well. Well, a couple, but I won't I won't be able to ask all of them. But so I mean, being a man of color, I've unfortunately experienced multiple instances where I was being racially profiled and things of that nature. And I would like to know and to ask you, how should you handle the occurrence of when your rights are being violated? So, for example, traffic stops for most people, at some point there's only so much you can do or say until if this ever happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but there's only so much you can do or say until, certain enforcers or people feel like they have to take things into to their own hands. So how would you handle that specifically for like traffic stops or something like that?
Sure, that's a really good question, Trey. So my short response would be, might sound counterintuitive on the front end, but could serve you well in the big picture. So even if, so unfortunately, I've had multiple encounters um, in different ways, largely around traffic stops. So I could think of one very specifically where my knee jerk reaction was getting upset and wanting to react and having a feeling, I'm thinking one specifically, I was a teenager at the time and different thoughts are going in my head. And, oh, because you have a badge and you did that. Right down that moment, that's probably not going to help. Whatever you could do in that moment, and we have to look at this as a strength to not make things worse. Remember, capture things vividly. So you're entitled to ask an officer for their badge number. You're entitled to do that. I would encourage individuals, I'm going to take the clinical hat off. At the end of the day, make sure you get home. Make sure you get home. When you calm down, when you get a chance to vent, you can go back to the precinct. You can gather information. You can find what are the steps to make a report. You can do all those other things. Law enforcement, they need to document every incident that takes place, right? And there are some rights that many of us are afforded that we're not privy to. So my short reaction would be try your best not to react. Look at it as a strength. Be like, okay, I'm chilling. I'm following directions. I'm listening to directives, this, that, and the third. And then when you get a chance in a moment, if you want to pursue that differently, do it. But when you're in a calm mind, calm state, gather some information, and then be able to approach things. All those things are documented and recorded. And now with 2025, the majority of those majority of officers also have some kind of body cam or car cams that could be an asset to you as well.
And thank you for that. I have one more question before I give the floor to Miss Drakes and Yatina. So I mean, there's been studies, psychological studies, psychology studies, and things of that nature as far as people with power and how was it absolute power corrupts absolutely. So do you think that the increasing number of like officers of color can help prevent some of these unsafe interactions? Like, do you think it can help bring down the number, or is it more of a power thing that just kind of corrupts people? Just asking for your opinion. What you
Sure.
think?
Sure. So I'll say this to you quickly. I never worked with law enforcement, but I did hold the government position for many years at a point in time, and some people are infatuated or intoxicated by that space of some perceived power or authority. That is true, not for everybody or all, but for some. There are individuals that are making an intentional effort to reverse or have an impact in a different way to demonstrate different things. What we have seen is when there's individuals who work in the community and live in the community, there's been been better outcomes. And also when individuals know them, we some of the departments have like the PAL program and other programs where you get to see the individuals outside the uniform and in different capacities. Sometimes those things have been helpful, but again, the most realistic thing I can share with you, Trey, and others is it's situational. It's situational, right? So every person of color doesn't like fried chicken, right? And every individual who's from the island doesn't speak Creole or Puerto Rican. I mean, excuse me, or Spanish or whatever the case is. So it is by case, but what we do know is the bad ones usually get the attention, and those who are doing really, really important work a lot of times are the ones that don't always get the acclaim. And that's the good thing because they're doing it for the right reason and they can care less about all of that.
Thank you for that. And I'll open it up to anyone else that has any other questions. All right. You said you don't have it. All right. Yatina, do you have any questions?
No, but thank you for hosting this. I think this is very important, especially for Black young men to see. It had me thinking about things that I need to tell my nephews, especially things they're in Boston and they have cars, and I'm like, I actually don't know if anyone actually sat down. I think because we see it and we're so on guard on what to do, but not the actual steps, like the legal steps that can cover you, it will cover you mostly. Um, so this was very informational. Definitely passing it along to all my tiny humans.
Thank you for that feedback, Yatina. And Trey, before we separate, I just want to share this one thing super, super fast. I would encourage all of you to have conversations around following the traffic laws. We're seeing a great surge where young people, the red stop signs, they don't come to a complete stop and they kind of roll through them. Or we're seeing this trend in Connecticut, the light turns yellow when people speed up. Or when
Mm,
the light turns green, just wait a couple seconds before you go, because those things can impact safety and those could be indicators or justifiable causes for you to get followed, stopped, pulled over, and have, the open that door for those different kind of inquiries.
absolutely. Thank you very much for this, Mr. Stallworth. Thank you to Welcome to Reality for those who are watching at home. The information is on the slides, and I do encourage everyone to make sure you go through it a few times and practice some of those things that he spoke about, because I think it is very important that we might practice for sports or we might practice to read, but we might not necessarily always think it's as important to prepare and practice some of these interactions we might have on a day-to-day basis. So thank you again very much. And thank you for those who are joining us. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.